Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about how to design searches that are going to be really constructive and help you get to where you need to be for your research process. So this is a developing model, a research model that we use in district at this point. And I want to point out a couple of things about it. One is that the colors move from very light to very dark, and that mirrors the research process. You move from very light or sort of almost fluffy resources, encyclopedic resources, all the way down to very detailed um, resources that can include primary sources. I also want to point out that there's some questions that will help guide your process, that it is a circle. It's not linear. That means that it doesn't have a beginning and an end. It just continues to go on and on. The idea is that at the end of your research, you will have learned a great deal and you'll incorporate that into whatever it is that you do next. You'll also note that there are 4 checkpoints in the research process and that you can move back and forth, as you can see from the arrows in the middle, and that you should question everything. By the time I get to see you, you're pretty much either in or finished with the exploration phase. You're starting to develop your research questions. What we want to look at next is how do you move from that exploring initial phase into the next phase. Um, so when you're in the exploration phase, you're going to search for really broad terms. So the example I'm going to be using for a little while at least is rules of combat or rules of engagement. We had a student who was working on this topic last year. The reason this student was looking for rules of engagement was because in 2009, the rules of engagement shifted. And the student's contention was that there was an increased number of casualties as a result of this change in the rules of engagement. And he had a lot of trouble finding resources, and he kept saying rules of war or rules of combat. And when we came up with rules of engagement, that really did seem to help him find a few more resources. But here's the thing, when you get to the investigative phase, that next level of research, you can't use those search terms anymore. You have to be shifting it up. In my exploration, I found this actually really quite terrible article. It was uninformative, it was fairly repetitive, it had a really obvious political slant, but look at this. I was able to glean from it a ton of keywords that were really helpful. So it's totally packed with language, the kind of language I need to learn in order to get more sophisticated and detailed and granular with my learning. So this is what you need to do next when you have an article. And honestly, I have had plenty of students start this process with Wikipedia. The idea is to go through an article like the one I just read, whether you like it or not, and start to collect keywords, because it the source itself, if you have the wrong keyword, it's not a big deal, because by the end of the process I have roughly 75 keywords that I want to include. So with 80 keywords, if I've got 20 that aren't so great, I still have 60 really good ones. So now in my second stage, I've got some really excellent resources. I've got, great list of keywords that I can come back to. You'll note that I have dates in there too, and if you combine those dates with some of those keywords, they're really excellent. Of the 12 keywords I have here, you'll notice that 8 are capitalized, 2 are dates, and there are only 3 that are basically just common words. All right, so now we get down to the more analytical aspect of our resources. And what we want to look for here, this is where I start looking for primary sources in a lot of cases. I want to see how it looks like to the people who are living it. So sometimes this is where we go find anecdotes, we find statistics, we find press releases. So in this instance, I found an interview with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So the interview is a really good resource for this analytical phase, because people get really detailed in their interviews. They talk about very specific information. So I wanted to find the press release about the change in rules of engagement, but I wasn't able to find quite that. What I was able to find excerpts from the press release. And that right there, that first line, those are additional search terms that are going to be super helpful for me as I move forward. So one of the things I noted from that in that further research was that it's not a keyword, but the timing. This change in legislation occurred in the first 30 days of Obama's presidency in direct response to an interrogation scandal, but it included ground combat restrictions as well as those for interrogation. So that gives me a whole bunch of new information that may push me all the way back to the explore phase in my research process, just for that one part. So that's what we mean about going back and forth through the research process. So now I'm looking up Executive Order 13440, and it explains where that legislation shifted. One of the resources I really encourage you to use is the EDS, which I call the search widget that's at the top of the database page. And you can access the database page through the navigation menu on the website. You will need to enter your username and password. I cannot disclose in this video what it is, but if you can see from this image that you can scan the QR code that will bring it up for you. There is also a key on the database page, and that tells you what username and password you should use, depending on what color the database name is written in. All right, so EDS cross-searches all of our databases with a few exceptions, which I'll talk about shortly. So you can enter a search in the little search widget at the top of the database page, and it will cross-search most of these databases. The exceptions are those that are off to the right. Those are not cross-searched. When you pull up the results, they are there though, so it is a great destination because basically it's kind of one-stop shopping for all your digital content. Even the stuff that doesn't go into the search results is there on the side. Now I want you to take note. How many results do you have here? And don't say 2. Yeah, it's 590,657. So those are your results if you just search for rules of engagement. But I'm going to make one little change. I'm going to add quotation marks, and I cut that down to 54,000 from 590,000. Now the reason I put quotes is because we have 3 words all together, and what that does is it keeps those words together in a search. So now every time I search, I'm looking for rules of engagement together. Now all I've done is I've changed from select a field option to title, and I've taken my 54,000 results down to 1,800 results. And now I've added 2 more search terms that I found from that lousy article in the Washington Times that I wasn't so thrilled with. But these are 2 big names, and this narrows down my search quite substantively because I've gone from 1,800 to 6. And again, I'm reminding you that if I run out of resources or I want to learn more, there are those additional resources there on the right. Okay, so now I'm going to add a row, and I added the Geneva Conventions, and now I have nothing. And that is a great place to be, because if you can start from scratch and build your way up, you're going to have really excellent results. By just changing rules of engagement back to select a field instead of title, I've brought myself back up to 513 results. By adding an asterisk to convention instead of Geneva Conventions, it's going to bring the word convention and any root that follows it. So conventional, conventions, conventionality, any such word. So the shift 8, that asterisk, is going to be really helpful. So I've added that word, and I've switched my rules of engagement back to the title, and I'm back to 1 result. And then here's those ands and ors are a little bit tricky. So I want to make sure that we understand that. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. But before I do that, I want to highlight that WOM (N) is one way you can include the word woman and women all in the same search, so you don't have to write it twice. What I've done here is I've put and then or, which is pretty much the equivalent of having A plus B plus C plus D minus E. And that is not the same as parenthetical A plus B plus C plus D, close parentheses, minus E in Boolean world. So I want to make sure that you understand that putting that or at the end is going to increase your searches to 16,000, whereas if we change the or to within a field, So convention or woman, and then we have ands off to the left. That's going to make it significantly change your search. So I've gone from 16,000 to 2 results. They are not the same. Now this is ProQuest National Newspaper Corps, and we'll talk more about databases when I see you next, but I do want to explain that you can do the same thing all in one field, and so that's what I've done here. You can also search your results, sort your results by relevance, and you can also give very specific publication date ranges. So you have those bars under the publication date. You can actually just use those sliders to adjust. Just make sure you click update. So here's another search that I found very helpful. So you've got your quotation marks, you've got your asterisk, you've got your parentheses, you've got your ands or ors, and your question mark under women or woman. So this is the terminology around that and will give you fewer results because it's asking for both items in your results, or will give you more results. It's either or. Not will exclude terms. Truncation is where it looks for the root of the word and you use the asterisks to tell it to find whatever follows that series of letters. Quotes will keep your terms grouped together, and question mark is a wild card. One other thing I want to point out is that when you are looking through EDS, you're using that database, you should click not on the title, which is your temptation, but click on PDF full text. If for some reason you accidentally click on the title, the PDF full text will appear on the left and you still have an option to click on that, but you're not going to see the actual article until you click on PDF full text. And next time I see you, we will talk about databases.